Morning, Jazz. How are you?
Morning, Lena. I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. We've been getting pretty busy. It looks like a lot of people are heading out in the market and starting to buy homes and sell homes, which is it's nice to see.
Yeah, recent articles are pointing to that the market is picking up, so that's a good sign.
Absolutely. I know we've been waiting for that as well as a lot of people for a few months now. So, Jazz, thanks for taking the time this morning to answer some questions. We have had a lot of clients reach out over the past few weeks, specifically with questions about new home agreements, new build agreements, new construction agreements, whatever you want to call them. I know there's a lot of different terms for those. So these are agreements that cover the purchase of a new home, whether that's a new house, a new condo, anything that you're buying from the builder rather than buying from an occupant of the house who's owned it previously, which is we call a resale. So I know, especially in Toronto, Toronto is one of the new home capitals of the world. We build a lot of condos and there are a lot of new home purchases, which we tend to spend a lot of time on as well. Anyhow, a few questions today that we've been receiving a lot, and I was hoping you'd have some time to shed some light on them.
Of course, I'm always ready to help and clarify terms for anybody that needs clarification.
Okay, perfect. So let's start from the top. Let's start from sort of the big questions that we get all the time. Jazz, what is included in a normal new home agreement?
So the most important thing that's included in a normal new home agreement is, of course, the purchase price, right? That's what you're paying for the unit that you're purchasing. However, what a lot of people are not aware of is that the purchase price is not necessarily just the price you're paying for the unit. It also includes a tax component. So the HST is built into the price, and a rebate is also built into the price. So builders normally assume that you plan on living in the unit and are therefore giving you a HST new housing rebate immediately. And so that's why the price is not necessarily the price you're paying for the unit. It also includes a tax component and is a much more complicated price than when you purchase a resale property from any other seller.
Okay, that's great, and I feel like that's sort of a topic in and of itself. Maybe we'll do another video on that
Yeah.
another day. But essentially, let's use round numbers because, frankly, it's too early to do a lot of math this morning. Let's say you buy a new condo for it says $1 million in your agreement of purchase and sale, in your new home agreement. That price includes both the tax, correct?
Yeah, it includes the HST component, the actual price of the unit, and then the rebate as well. So an automatic deduction is given to the price, assuming that you're going to live there. If you don't live there, then you're going to have to bring in that rebate in addition to your purchase price.
Gotcha. So these are the types of things that when we do a new build review, a new home agreement review, we walk through with the clients and we sort of explain, look, your agreement of purchase and sale includes a listed price of $1 million. And this is how it's broken down. This is the tax component. This is the rebate component. If you're buying the home for investment purposes, this is how it will impact the rebate and whatnot. So,
yeah, that's one of the most important things of our reviews. It's the first thing that we like to point out is that the HST implications, because the rebate can be a significant amount, and normally mortgage lenders are not willing to cover that HST amount. It's not considered a part of the price of the unit. So you may be required to bring that in addition to your down payment.
of course, the lenders are not lending on the HST component of a new home,
Exactly, yeah.
which makes sense. Now, speaking of costs, are there typically any costs in addition to what you see on the face of an agreement?
Yeah, so on top of the purchase price, normally there's a section called the adjustments in most agreements. The adjustments are additional costs that the builder is taking on and passing on to the purchaser. So examples of those are realty taxes for the year. Those are normally required to be paid in full. The builder will pay that themselves and then recuperate that from the purchaser. Then there's other costs as well, like common expenses. If you're buying a condo, they normally require a certain amount, usually about 3 months, to be paid up front so that they can contribute, create a reserve fund in a sense. And then there's development charges and education levy. So that's for development of the area and potential schools. Everyone has to pay their fair share because there's going to be, of course, an infrastructure that needs to be developed around the unit. So closing costs normally, typically, I think they range around from 1 to 5%. However, it's always a good idea to have a lawyer review them and try to cap them, because those costs, if not capped in the agreement, can be unlimited. And that can be a big surprise for some people, where they end up paying, an extra $30,000, $40,000 that they did not know they had to bring in when they signed the agreement.
Great. That's really helpful, Jazz. So part of what you do when you're doing a new home agreement review with a client is you would review all of these various costs, just so that the purchaser knows exactly what they're in for. And beyond that, you'll actually go back in a lot of cases and negotiate with the builder and cap certain expenses. Maybe for those people who aren't familiar with that terminology, you can explain what it means to ask a builder to cap expenses.
So capping the cost just means to put a limit. So for example, if an agreement says that they can pass on development charges to you, normally there won't be an amount. They'll just say that whatever we pay, you're gonna have to pay. Well, what you can try to do is stop that amount at a certain amount. So you could say, only up to 5,000. That's all we're gonna pay. We're not paying more than that. And sometimes they are agreeable to it, sometimes they are not. The good thing about using a firm like Axess Law is that we have a lot of experience with a lot of new builds. So we have a lot of negotiation experience with these the vendors' lawyers, and we understand how much to cap certain units at and certain developments. So
basically, to be blunt, you've done this so many times, the maximum amount we can ask a builder for.
Yeah, exactly. For certain projects, I know how much they're going to give us and how much they're not.
You can push the envelope. I like it. That's great. Okay, perfect. Next question is one that we get a lot, and it can be confusing. It can be confusing for people who haven't seen these agreements before, but it can also be confusing for people who have seen them before. So if you read through one of these new home agreements, you'll see a bunch of different closing dates. Now, if I buy a house from you, there's only one closing date. I'm going to get the house on August 1st. I'm going to pay you the money. I'm going to take my keys. I'm going to move in. But for these agreements, there's a whole bunch of closing dates set out in the agreement. Could you kind of walk us through what those are all about? Why do we have so many, and what do they mean?
Sure. So generally speaking, the reason why there's multiple dates is because it is a new home, and the construction of the home is dependent on a lot of factors, right? Having drywall, for example, or things like that, right? They have to build the unit, build the entire project from scratch. And what they're giving is a timeline as to when they expect it to be completed. There's usually the first tentative date, which is when they expect it to be completed. However, that date can be extended a certain amount of times as long as notice is given to the purchaser up until the outside closing date. As long as they follow the notice provisions, they are not required to pay any compensation to the purchaser. So as long as they are following the instructions in the Terion addendum, they're not necessarily required to pay any compensation. And a lot of people are not aware of that. They believe that the first tentative date is when they expect to get the unit, and that it's likely not going to be extended. However, from my experience, especially with the whole pandemic situation right now, a lot of condos are being extended and being pushed to that outside closing date.
Gotcha. Okay. So that's very helpful. And I know, for us, we are always dealing with several dates as well for these types of new home agreements. And it's important that we keep track, and they're not always set in stone the way that resale properties are a little bit more likely to be set in stone.
Yeah.
So that's great. And I know that's a big issue that we're dealing with often. Next question is kind of related to the finishes of condo units. Now, I know a lot of agreements will stipulate various things like, marble countertops, 9-foot ceilings in the kitchen, blah, blah, blah. Is there a way, let's say I don't want marble countertops, I want, onyx or something like that. Is there a way to vary the finishes and those types of details that are typically contained in an agreement?
Yeah, so definitely there are ways to vary it. If you'd like to upgrade it, of course, you can change it yourself during the upgrade phase when the builder asks you to come to the sales office and pick those choices. However, something to keep in mind is that sometimes you're promised a certain aspect of the unit that later on the builder may change, and they usually are allowed to do that because of the way the agreement is worded. There are vast powers for them to vary the floor plans and also the ceiling heights and the location of windows and things like that. And it's very important that as a purchaser, those are reviewed, that you have a lawyer look at them to ensure that you understand, even though you were promised marble floors, those could be changed to a different material.
Got it. So again, a big part of what you're doing when you're reviewing one of these agreements is looking at these details and perhaps asking the client saying, look, this is what the agreement contains in terms of various finishes. Is this what you were expecting to be included in the agreement?
Exactly. So we always ask our clients, like, do you have any specific questions you'd like us to answer in our review? And that is one of the most common ones, right? They're under the impression that they're going to get a kitchen island, or they're going to get 9-foot ceilings. And, we always point out the clause and try to negotiate with the builder a change in that clause so that our client gets what they had assumed that they would be receiving when they signed the contract.
Perfect. Now, thank you for those answers. That's great. Let's flip this a little bit. And I know we've only got about a minute left, but we've been doing this long enough that we have seen sort of the messy side of these types of situations as well. So just to be clear, we always advise it's absolutely critical that you have a lawyer review your agreement of purchase and sale for any number of reasons. Typically, someone's given, 10-day cooling off period within which they can review the agreement, have a lawyer look it over for all of the reasons that Jas has already suggested, as well as other ones that we haven't.
Yeah, multiple more reasons that we would probably go into hours of talking.
Exactly. So I'm going to put you on the spot for a second, but you've seen probably messy situations when clients haven't had this done. They've had their 10-day cooling off period. They've gone to, they haven't had their agreement reviewed. They've signed off on it. They've gone firm on it. What can happen? I know a million different things can happen, but what's a common thing that can happen that we've seen clients come to us before occupancy and say, hey, I'm ready to close. I've never had my agreement reviewed. What are the types of things that may occur because they did not have the review done?
Well, a few things, like during occupancy, some people aren't even aware that they have to pay an occupancy fee, right? They assume that the occupancy means that it's their final closing. People are not aware that they have to pay a rent, in a sense, to the builder until the condo is registered. That's more of a condo specific issue, but that is very common. And that amount can be close to what your mortgage payments would be. And it does not get credited towards your agreement or your purchase price. Another issue is completion of the unit. So a lot of people are not aware that when they receive the unit, it doesn't have to be fully completed, right? Certain things are left undone by the builder because they still are in the process of completing it. So you could get a unit without a kitchen sink, or you could get a unit without doors. And that's usually a surprise to people that haven't had their agreement reviewed. Closing costs, as we mentioned, the adjustments, that's a big one. A lot of people, if they don't cap the costs, are not aware of why they're bringing in an additional $40,000, $50,000. And it's because they didn't have someone review the agreement with them and explain why those costs are being added on. The list goes on. I could talk for hours.
Let's not scare people too much.
Yeah.
But no, that's a great description. And look, they can be an excellent investment. They can be a great buy. I think the bottom line, have someone review them, have it reviewed well, use it. I mean, we do it all the time. It's quick. We can do it, within a day, maybe 2 days, depending on, the time of year. But it's a quick thing to do, and it covers you. It's worth it. It's a big investment.
Exactly.
Guys, anything else you want to bring up before we sign off?
Yeah, I just want to reiterate that new build investments, although tricky, are still very good investments because usually you're getting a price lower than market value. And that's very beneficial in a sense that if you're using it as an investment property, and also if you're a first-time home buyer, right? And they also allow you to stretch out the payments through payment schedules, which is much easier for most people to pay rather than an upfront payment of a large sum.
Yeah.
So I do agree that they are very good investments, that they can be very beneficial as long as you have someone review the contract with you so that there's no surprises when it comes to the closing.
Sounds great. Perfect. Thank you so much, Jas. This was very helpful. Maybe we can take time another day to go over HST, if we can find a chalkboard and we'll put you to work.
Maybe get an accountant in here with us as well to explain.
Exactly. Because we
Or
always
find-
get questions on that. And I feel like I'm a very visual person, and I think a lot of people are. I think
Yeah,
everyone is. That's the type of thing would be very helpful to do visually and actually break it down with an example.
definitely, yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Have an excellent Wednesday. And
You're welcome, Lena.
we'll do it again soon.
For sure.
Take
Bye.
care.